The determinist approach proposes that all behavior is caused by preceding factors and is thus predictable. By contrast, free will is the idea that we are able to have some choice in how we act and assumes that we are free to choose our behavior. In other words, we are self-determined. For example, people can make a free choice as to whether to commit a crime or not, unless they are a child or they are insane. This does not mean that behavior is random, but we are free from the causal influences of past events. According to free will, a person is responsible for their own actions. Determinism. Some approaches in psychology see the source of determinism as being outside the individual, a position known as environmental determinism. For example, Bandura, 1961, showed that children with violent parents will in turn become violent parents through observation and imitation. Others see it from coming from inside, that is, in the form of unconscious motivation or genetic determinism or biological determinism. Behaviorists are strong believers in determinism. Their most forthright and articulate spokesman has been B.F. Skinner. Concepts like free will and motivation are dismissed by them as illusions that disguise the real causes of human behavior. For Skinner, 1971, these causes lay in the environment, more specifically in physical and psychological reinforcers and punishments. They believe that it is only because we are not aware of the environmental causes of our own behavior or other people's that we are tricked into believing in our ability to choose. B.F. Skinner believed that the person who commits a crime has no real choice. They have simply been propelled in this direction by environmental circumstances and a personal history, which makes breaking the law natural and inevitable. For the behaviorists, any law-abiding citizen is simply someone who has experienced an accumulation of reinforcers in the opposite direction. Having been rewarded for following rules in the past, the individual does so in the future. There is no moral evaluation or even mental calculation involved. All behavior is under stimulus control. The other main supporters of determinism are those who adopt a biological perspective. However, for them it is internal, not external forces that are the determining factor. According to the biological perspective, sociobiology evolution governs not only the behavior of a species but also the genetic inheritance of each individual within it. For example, Bowlby, 1969, states a child has an innate need to attach to one main attachment figure. Personality traits like extroversion or neuroticism, and the behavior associated with them, are triggered by neurological and hormonal processes within the body. There is no need for the concept of an autonomous human being. Ultimately, this view sees us as no more than biological machines, and even consciousness itself is interpreted as a level of arousal in the nervous system. However, a problem with determinism is that it is inconsistent with society's ideas of responsibility and self-control, which form the basis of our moral and legal obligations. An additional limitation concerns the facts that psychologists cannot predict a person's behavior with 100% accuracy due to the complex interaction of variables which influence behavior. Free will. Personal agency is the humanistic term for the exercise of free will. Personal agency refers to the choices we make in life, the paths we go down and their consequences. For humanistic psychologists such as Maslow, 1943, and Rogers, 1951, freedom is not only possible but also necessary if we are to become fully functional human beings. Both see self-actualization as a unique human need and as a form of motivation which sets us apart from all other species. There is thus a line to be drawn between the natural and the social sciences. To take a simple example, when two chemicals react, there is no sense in imagining that they could behave in any other way than the way they do. However, when two people come together, they could agree, fall out, come to a compromise, start a fight, and so on. The permutations are endless, and in order to understand their behavior, we would need to understand the formative experiences, current situations, gifts and limits of both parties. Cognitive psychologists are also inclined to attribute importance to free will and adopt a soft determinist view. However, whereas humanists are especially interested in our choice of ends, how each of us sees the road to self-actualization, cognitive psychologists are more inclined to focus on the choice of means. In other words, for them it is the rational processing of information which goes into the making of a decision which is their main interest. Conscious reflection on our own behavior is seen as the best way of achieving goals and learning from mistakes. Calculation, strategy, organization, etc. are interpreted as key elements, not only in governing the choices that we make but also in helping us make the right choices in particular situations. Mental illnesses appear to undermine the concept of free will. For example, Individuals with OCD lose control of their thoughts and actions just as people with depression might lose control over their emotions. The deterministic psychologies of those who believe that what is inevitable are contrasted by humanistic approaches which assume that human beings have the ability to control their own destinies. However, there is also an intermediate position that goes back to the psychoanalytic psychology of Sigmund Freud. At first sight, Freud seems to be a supporter of determinism in that he argued that our actions and our thoughts are controlled by the unconscious. However, the very goal of therapy was to help the patient overcome that force. Indeed, without the belief that people can change, therapy itself makes no sense. This insight has been taken up by several neo-Freudians. One of the most influential has been Erich Fromm, 1941. In Fear of Freedom, he argues that we all have the potential to control our own lives but that many of us are too afraid to do so. As a result, we give up our freedom and allow our lives to be governed by circumstance, other people, political ideology or irrational feelings. However, determinism is not inevitable, and in the very choice we all have to do good or evil. Fromm sees the essence of human freedom. Summary: psychologists who take the free will view suggest that determinism removes freedom and dignity and devalues human behavior. There are important implications for taking either side in this debate. Deterministic explanations for behavior reduce individual responsibility. In other words, their behavior was determined. As a science, psychology attempts to develop laws to predict behavior. Clearly, a purely deterministic or free will approach does not seem appropriate when studying human behavior. Most psychologists use the concept of free will to express the idea that behavior is not a passive reaction to forces, but that individuals actively respond to internal and external forces. The term soft determinism is often used to describe this position, whereby people do have a choice, but their behavior is always subject to some form of biological or environmental pressure.